I want to thank ToRetro for sending this for review, more on them later. The TRIMUI Brick, a lovely looking device that we'll unpack and review in this video. In the box, of course, you have your device, you have an instruction manual, pretty thorough overall, a USB-C to USB-A cable, and replacement shoulder buttons. You have two sets separate, one that is higher, more boxy, the other one is more curvy and lower, and you also have one pre-installed that is kind of between the two on the device itself. Something I'll probably mention often, the build quality of this device comes through the moment you open it. I was really shocked at how good it feels in hand. It invokes quality is what I'm trying to say. So I did change my shoulder buttons right off the bat. I tested all of them and I ended up liking the one that was a little more curvy. So I just did the swap for all four because I figured that's the set I preferred. With the changes done, I was ready to power up the device, but just before doing so, a quick satisfying peel. Yep, that hits the spot. Alright, powering it, the other thing that shocked me is the quality of the screen. It doesn't have any light leaks. It is extremely vibrant and quite bright overall. It really looks good. I was extremely happy with the way that it looks. Even just looking at menus, like it's one of those things where, again, the moment you power it, it just looks great. The LEDs also have a nice touch on the device, but you'll see very soon that you can make a lot of adjustments to the two front buttons, which is another very neat thing that this device does. Going straight into audio, the device does get loud enough, it gets low enough as well, and the audio does sound good overall. I feel like there's just no bass at all, which is probably ideal because it allows for a decently good enough separation of your mids and highs. You know, considering the size and just the price point as well, I do find that it sounds like a cheap speaker that is extremely well tuned, and overall I'm really happy with the way that it comes out. And for 8-bit and 16-bit audio, which is mainly what you're going to be playing, I find it just works great for the use case. They sent it to me with a bunch of games and apps pre-installed, but by far the most important one will be to adjust your two front LED buttons. And they're equivalent to L3 and R3, but they're used for a very specific purpose, which is really cool. And you have one of 4 different options. And you can also lock their values with the switch off to the side. While you can adjust the values of all different 4 options in your settings, having a quick shortcut is a really neat touch. You have a couple more apps, one in particular, Moonlight, which we'll talk about later during the video. There are some ports of more recent games such as Celeste, Balatro, Sonic Mania, Stardew Valley, and the likes. But of course you have a lot of ROMs as well. I can't speak on if the 64, 128, or 256 gigabyte options that ToRetro offers in terms of microSD has more or less games, but they sent it to me with the 64 gigabytes, and there was already games and titles pre-installed, so best to assume that a larger card will have more games, but I would recommend that you reach out to them to confirm if ever. Again, that screen and that build quality feels so good in hand. The TRIMUI Brick is already a great experience. And one thing I wanted to confirm, which I assumed, it's all running on top of RetroArch, which you can go in and make all the adjustments that you usually want to, or potentially add filters. Of course, this is not the most powerful chip, so mileage may vary, but you know, it's always kind of a trial and error. But in terms of tweaking, if you're familiar with it, you have what is needed to do so and make it a little more to your desire. Quick warning, as we'll get into a flashing effect for a short time, so beware if you are sensitive to that, please skip exactly 20 seconds ahead. I find that inserting black frames to test the panel stability is a great way to do it, and from what I've seen, we have a pretty steady 60 Hz, so not designed to be able to insert black frames, but as far as the frame rate goes, it's very stable. There's no anomalies that was showcased by this quick test. When talking buttons, everything on this device is a dome style button, tactile switch basically, with I'd say little to a little bit of travel. And I'm not usually the biggest fan of dome type switch, but what I really enjoy with this one is that it's very cohesive across the entire device, making it so that there are no weirdness when pushing the buttons. You quickly get used to it. They're responsive. One thing I will say, I find that when pushing them very quickly, so if you're playing a game where fast typing is important, I find that the keys stick a little bit. When playing regularly, no problems at all. It's really when fast tapping that it doesn't feel exactly the best, but otherwise it's perfectly fine. And again, I'm just here thinking about the price point. It just is great with the overall package. They're not trying to add stick to this one. It doesn't feel cramped. You have a lot of space for all your buttons. I was not really running into accidental pushes either. And when talking about the D-pad, everything was responsive. Performance. Arguably, PSP is going to be one of the harder systems that this can emulate. And indeed it can. I wouldn't expect a steady 30 FPS across the board on more difficult to run games, but you're close enough, and to the point that you could end up playing an entire campaign of God of War on this TRIMUI brick. Now, I don't know a whole lot about all these SoCs that tends to repeat because I've kind of left the retro handheld market for a while. I mean, what I see here works, so all good. I tested Dreamcast and I would say it was about the same as PSP. I don't think you're gonna have a whole lot of problems running most games with this handheld. But when I moved to this specific stage, I thought the pacing of the frame rate didn't feel as smooth in comparison to the previous stage. So I guess it's not going to be 100% performance all the time, but close enough that you should be able to play through most that this is designed to run. When looking at N64, it also ran. I think the struggle here will probably be more along the lines that you don't have an analog, but again, you can use the shortcuts to make quick work of that if you have a game that does not require you to utilize both too often, which, if you remember the design of the N64 controller, it was pretty much made in a way that you wouldn't be using them both at the same time. So all in all, you'll be able to manage. Maybe not the most pleasant system to run, but from what little I tested, it worked. And here I figured I would just go through all the different systems that comes pre-installed on the TRIMUI brick. Now, again, like Sega Saturn, I haven't tried it, but do I feel like it's gonna run the smoothest in here? I don't think so. If going into the upper echelon in terms of system power that this is designed to run, you may hit a few walls and a few underserving performance experiences, but I don't think you buy this device for that either. I believe you buy this device to go deeper into the retro market overall. One thing happily surprises this FC multi-cartridge menu, which I don't know for you as a kid. I had one or two come in my house and I did get to play with these cartridges, and I have some good fond memories of them. One game in particular, Formation Z, and that's what I liked with those cartridges. You would never go through each and every one of the titles. A lot would be just the same repeated with different sprites, but every now and then you would land a nice gem and, you know, play that for a while. Formation Z, if you have never played it, I loved it so much. It's a cool one because you can change from like a Gradius type shmup to then being on the floor as a walking mech, I assume. Anyways, moving on. You also have your settings menu where you can do a bunch of things like add Wi-Fi or change your brightness, address your LEDs. So that's neat as well. And I just love the theme overall, like big fonts, pleasant ones, great color, like it's not too over the place. It's very contained, it feels minimalistic, but with some flair, with some character. But yeah, you have settings to change some of the things if you don't want to rely on shortcuts. And of course, you also have more options in there as well. In fact, you can even address the warmth, the exposure, a lot of things with the panel, which is perfect because it is such a great one. But you have more than just brightness, is what I'm saying. One last thing I wanted to touch base on was Moonlight. It is there, but it's not really usable because you have too few options. You only have 2 options of resolution, so you can't even stick to a 4:3. I tried changing it with custom resolution on my PC side. You couldn't. You have no touchscreen, and you don't have enough buttons to get in options in the software. That's really the big takeaway. The big struggle is you don't have options in Moonlight itself to adjust it in a way that it's going to work with the software. Although it's there, best to assume that you're not really going to be able to make much use of it. And then also you don't have 5 GHz, so even when using it, chances are you will experience latency, as I was here with the game. I couldn't do anything. Overall, it's something I would highly suggest in terms of purchase. I think it is a great value, and one thing that shocked me in particular was by far the build quality of that device. It's just overall very well designed. It has a very nice look. It's not over the top. It just looks classy. It's probably the best word that I can use to describe it. Classy. So it goes without saying, the best way to acquire one for yourself is to go visit ToRetro's website. They have a variety of options so you can tweak it the way you want, and they also have a 15% off right now if you go on their website to make a purchase of the TRIMUI Brick or other devices. The delivery was quick, no problems on my end, and so there it is. And that is it. Please do let me know how you feel about this review. I'm just coming back in the retro handheld scene, so I'd love to have your opinions. Until then, thank you very much for clicking and watching the video. Please consider dropping a like, the subscription with the bell to not miss future reviews. I'm Clef, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.